Well, greetings and welcome to episode 101 of Bible 180, 180 episodes between Genesis and Revelation. Today we're on the last story in Matthew chapter 20 before he enters into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, which we'll cover in the next episode. So this is kind of the last of his public ministry. And at the end of chapter 20, let me read the verses. As they were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. There were two blind men sitting by the roadside. When they heard that Jesus was passing by, they shouted, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." The crowd sternly ordered them to be quiet, but they shouted even more loudly, "Have mercy on us, Lord, Son of David." Jesus stood still and called to them and said, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said to him, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." Moved with compassion, Jesus touched their eyes. Immediately they regained their sight and followed him. Now, put yourself into that situation. Put yourself in the shoes of the two blind men sitting there. Think of what it would have been like to be a blind beggar. Think of how you would experience the world if you were blind and only could sit by the side of the road and beg. The whole world would smell and look and would be different from the people around you. You were marginalized. All you could do was sit by the side of the road and beg, unable to see everything that's going on around you. Jesus and a large crowd of his disciples and followers were leaving Jericho, and it was an exciting and noisy time with the crowd murmuring about Jesus, many people wanting to be healed by him. And over on the side of the road were two blind men sitting by the side of the road, two blind beggars who could not see. When someone would give them a smile or a word of encouragement, they couldn't see it. When there was a low-hanging branch or an angry dog or something that lay in front of them, they ran the risk of walking directly into harm's way. The beauty of the birds and the butterflies and rainbows and flowers and trees and little children were all withheld from them. Their world looked exactly the same when they closed their eyes at night, and when they opened them in the morning, it was dark no matter what. You experience the world in a different way when you sit by the road as a blind beggar. Blind beggars during the time of Jesus were not only blind, but they were undoubtedly impoverished and marginalized and sidelined. Blind beggars were doomed to be blind paupers living on the streets of Jerusalem or wherever they sat, begging for pennies or food for survive, having nothing to sell to get any money for themselves. They were utterly dependent on others for the basic necessities of life. But then one day it happened. The two blind beggars heard the hustle and the bustle and the intense excitement around them. There was a large crowd going by, and I knew with the dust and the dirt kicked up by the road of Jericho that something would be settling on their clothes and their hair. They asked what was happening, and someone said Jesus of Nazareth was passing by. Now, the large crowd would have had a great opportunity for the blind beggars to make a little money. A lot of people, a lot of money. After all, with the fine, upstanding, religious people, there was an opportunity to make some money by begging loudly. A couple of coins in the cup. Could you please help me out? Maybe some of the crowd would be feeling a little bit pious about following Jesus and would be generously giving to a blind beggar in need. The beggars could have taken advantage of Jesus being there for their financial benefit. They could have lined their pockets with a little extra cash, but down deep, they knew there was something much more that Jesus could do for them. Who knows what they had heard about Jesus, but they knew that a couple extra coins was nothing compared to what they might ask Jesus to do for them. And so they cried out these words, "Have mercy on us, Lord, Son of David." Have mercy on us. Let's break those words down. What's interesting is that those four words, "have mercy on us," are words that are used most of the time in the Psalms. And when the writer says, "Have mercy on us, have mercy on me," He's addressing it to God, realizing that the God is the one who can have mercy and heal. So, have mercy on us are words in Jesus' time that were really only addressed to God. Have mercy on us, Lord, Son of David. David is a statement of faith that the beggars had, who had no right to do anything more than just sit by the side of the road and beg. And the crowd tried to silence them, said, "Be quiet," but they shouted all the more, "Have mercy on us, Lord, Son of David." Louder and louder they cried until, if you remember the words, Jesus stood still. Think of that. Jesus stood still. Did you notice those words? This is only one of a few times in the Gospels where Jesus just stops and stands still. Everything around him was moving, but he stopped and stood still for the blind beggars. They would have been easy to overlook and ignore. He could have walked on because there was so much for him to do. He was on his way to Jerusalem, after all. He was on a mission from God, but he stood still. And he asked the beggars, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." And moved with compassion, Jesus touched their eyes, and immediately they gained their sight and followed Jesus. Lord, have mercy on have mercy on us. Mercy was the theme of Jesus' ministry. Everywhere he went, he showed mercy. There's about a dozen times in the Gospels where someone or some group cried out, "Have mercy on me." And it's always when those words are used by someone who is marginalized, someone that the crowd overlooked, someone that people look past or look through, someone who desperately needs love and healing, but we're not receiving it. Jesus, have mercy on us is often said by those who were overlooked by others, people who need love and compassion, but weren't receiving it from anyone. Think of that, because it's kind of, in a sense, hard to come to grips with what does that require of us? This mercy, this love from Jesus to those who are marginalized in our culture, maybe because of their age, whether they're very young or very old, maybe because of their gender, male or female, or their sexual preference, or their nationality or citizenship status or background or language. A lot of people these days are marginalized by kind of the mainline folks because they're overlooked. And yet the ministry of Jesus is Jesus went to marginalized people, people that many people did not think were very important, but Jesus was the one who went to them. And again, as we've said in previous episodes, this story shows once again that with Jesus, mercy triumphs over judgment. That's really hard sometimes for a Christian to follow, knowing that the way of Jesus is the way of mercy over judgment. It's so easy to be judgmental, to lift your eyes past someone who is marginalized, someone who thinks or votes different from us. It's so easy to be judgmental, but there's a time in life that we in the church and we who are Christians need to get beyond condescension and negativity and divisiveness. It's all over and it's way too prevalent. But the way of Jesus shows mercy and love and compassion, that is more important than judgment. Now, think when you're trying to show mercy to someone that other people overlook, when you're trying to bring the light of Christ to others, one question you might ask yourself is, with marginalized people, what does love require of me? What does the love of Jesus in my heart require of me? Does it require just moving on? Does it require listening? I mean, we have two ears and one mouth. We should listen twice as much as we speak. People around us, all of us, are in pain everywhere, but we often just don't recognize it because we're doing our errands, we're doing our job, we're going to places we need to go and seeing the people we want to see. We're not tuned into the fact that there's people around us all the time who are in pain every single day, and when we don't notice it because they're not the center of our attention, then they get even more marginalized and pushed to the edges of the sidelines. When Jesus was walking through the streets of Jericho, there was a whole crowd following him because he was the center of attention. The two blind guys were way off on the side of the road trying to get people's attention. The people told them, "Be quiet, don't talk so loud." But Jesus heard their pain, their cries of pain over the crowds, of the noise of the crowds. He heard their cries over the shouting of the people who were pushing past others just to get closer to Jesus, the hustle and bustle all around him, and Jesus heard the sound of the blind beggars. And, you know, I sometimes wonder how often we don't hear the pain of those around us, people we work with, people in our neighborhoods, maybe even people in our own families. Maybe they're not verbally shouting their pain, but perhaps their pain is crying out in multiple ways. And go back to the question I asked a moment ago, what does the love of Jesus require of me? Maybe a starting point is learning to listen above the noise of what's happening around me, learning to listen to the pain around me. That's what Jesus did. He stopped. He stopped dead in his tracks, stopped right where he was in the middle of the road, people walking and talking all around him, and he stops and he hears the cries of one to whom no one else was listening. He spiritually tuned himself into their pain and he stopped. And part of what we learn from this story is that if we're going to do what the love of Jesus requires of us, then we have to get used to being interrupted. Grief and pain doesn't come over people when it's convenient on your daytimer. Needs don't show up when you have a free evening. Tragedies don't wait until there's an opening on your schedule. One thing that gets in the way of good Christians showing mercy and love is busyness, because people don't have the time. People don't take the time because it's not convenient. The steps and the stops of Jesus show us that we sometimes have to forget about ourselves long enough to lend a helping hand, even when it's not on your to-do list or written on your calendar. When you listen for clues that people are in pain, and when you hear their cries, you can love like Jesus by stopping and hearing someone else's pain. Remember the Beatles' old song, Eleanor Rigby, "All the lonely people, where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they all belong?" Lonely people are all over there, all over our paths that we walk every day, and our paths in the church. People that need God's love and care and protection, and they need us to just be there for them, to give them a call, to ask, how are things going? To intervene in their lives when it's possible that we can. Sometimes those conversations might be 10 seconds, sometimes it might be 45 minutes, but to open yourself up to stop and listen and be there for someone else. So when we think about this story, when we think about what does the love of Jesus in my heart require of me, It does direct us to the people on the periphery of life, on the sidelines, on the margins, like the blind beggars, shouting for someone to have mercy on them, shouting for Jesus. And he stopped and he went over to them and he said, "What do you want me to do for you?" The willingness to be interrupted, the willingness to take time, to be kind, to have compassion, to show compassion like Jesus did, and to be with them and help them. Sometimes in a hurting person's life, there's nothing more important than that. So I hope your day is good. I hope you live with a great deal of gratitude. And until the next episode, you take care of yourself. Bye-bye.